Keanu sat on the sidewalk holding a sign that read, "I need help." Dressed in old clothes, he tried to understand what it was like to ask for help on the street, feeling every glance from the passers-by. He wanted to understand what those who were homeless, hungry, and hopeless went through. He hoped this endeavor would help him figure out how he could help these people. Several hours passed, and although many people walked by, no one paid attention to Keanu. His patience was beginning to wear thin when a man stopped in front of him. He was wearing an old coat, carrying a backpack, and looked at Keanu with an expression that was hard to decipher, both curiosity and compassion. The man glanced around and, without saying a word, pulled out a few pieces of bread from a bag and quietly handed them to Keanu. "Here, take this. I know how hard it is," he said, not looking up. Keanu was surprised. He took the bread and thanked the man. There was no pity in his eyes, only genuine understanding. Keanu realized that this man, despite his appearance, knew what it was like to struggle for survival. "What's your name?" Keanu asked, observing the man who seemed mysterious to him. The man looked at him, shrugged, and after a moment of thought replied, "I'm Robs." "And you? What are you doing here?" Keanu was taken aback. He had expected the man to recognize him, but Rob said nothing about his fame. He simply sat beside him as if nothing unusual was happening. Keanu felt a sense of relief inside, realizing that his name hadn't made a difference in this world. "I'm here to understand what it's like to be on the street. What it's like when you have no home, no work, and you just have to survive." "These aren't just words, Robs. I want to understand how I can help," Keanu said, trying to be sincere. Robs looked at him with skepticism, but after a moment of silence, he finally spoke. "Help?" He chuckled. "Here, everyone's on their own. You won't understand until you're in my shoes. I used to be a doctor. I had everything, home, family. But then I got sick. And when you can't work, everyone starts turning away from you. Family, friends, colleagues, everyone." Keanu felt his heart tighten. He didn't know how to respond, but his eyes met Rob's eyes, and they spoke without words. "So, what did you do when you ended up on the street?" Keanu asked, unable to look away. "What did I do?" Rob smiled crookedly. "Survived. It's not easy. Sometimes people give you food, sometimes they don't. But that's life. You have to hold on. If you don't ask, they give. But if you don't give, then that's it." Keanu pondered deeply. He realized that not everyone on the street was simply there because of their own mistakes. Some people lost everything due to illness or accidents, and they needed more than just food. They needed real support. "Don't you want to go back home? You have a chance," Keanu asked. Robs glanced at him, and for a brief moment his face brightened. "No," he replied calmly. "I've realized that on the streets I'm needed. Maybe even more than anywhere else. We all need each other. But you, what are you doing here? You're not like us." Keanu didn't know how to respond, but he now knew that this meeting wasn't a coincidence. He felt that he wasn't just observing this world, he had become part of it, and he needed to figure out how to be useful. "I'm probably not like you," he said, standing up, "but I'm going to find a way to help. Not just with money, but with something more important." Rob shook his head, but a glimmer of hope appeared in his eyes. "Maybe you're right. I hope you can. But just remember, everyone has their own truth. You won't always know what to do." When Keanu stood up, he knew that this meeting was an important moment in his life. He didn't know how to help everyone, but ideas were already swirling in his head, and now he understood that his journey had just begun. A few days had passed since Keanu met Robs. He kept sitting on the streets, trying to comprehend the reality he was facing. Robs wasn't the only one who had ended up on the streets due to difficult circumstances. Keanu decided it was time to meet other homeless people to understand the stories hidden behind their faces. One evening, Robs came up to Keanu and said there was a group of people he needed to meet. Keanu was ready. He understood that talking to these people would provide him with valuable information on how to proceed. He stood up and followed Robs to a small alley where several people had gathered. It was dark, and only the dim light from street lamps illuminated their faces. "Keanu, meet them," Robs said. "These are people who, like me, ended up on the streets for different reasons. Everyone has their own story, but we all went through the same thing." The first to speak was a middle-aged man with cracked skin and chapped lips. His face was covered with gray hair, and Keanu could tell that his life hadn't been easy. "Hello," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Max. I used to be an architect. I created buildings, made projects. But when the crisis hit, my businesses collapsed. I couldn't pay off my debts, lost everything. Sometimes people start blaming you for not handling it, but they don't know what happens behind closed doors. You have your life, and it gets torn apart. And here I am, on the streets." Keanu listened intently to their stories, feeling the weight of their struggles. Max's story was hard to hear, but it wasn't the only one. Next, a woman, much younger than the rest, spoke. Her face was well maintained, but her eyes told a different story. She lowered her gaze and quietly spoke. "I'm Lena. I lost everything after my son got sick. I poured all my money into his treatment, but when I couldn't pay the bills, they froze my accounts and seized all my property. Then my husband left. I was left alone with my child, and this is what happened to me. I couldn't get back to a normal life, and now here I am, on the streets. And you know what's the scariest? I can't help my son, and I can't help myself." Keanu felt his heart tighten. Listening to these stories, he began to understand how ruthless and unforgiving the world could be, especially for those who had found themselves in hardship. These people were victims of circumstances, not their own doing. Next, an old man with a weathered face joined the conversation. He sat on a small piece of cardboard, shielding himself from the cold wind. His dark, tired eyes betrayed no emotion, no hope. He spoke softly. "I'm George. I used to be a sailor. My voyages around the world ended after an accident. I lost my health, and with my health, I lost my job. I came back to the city, but I couldn't find a place to stay. You think people wait for your misfortunes? Yeah, I had to learn how to survive, but every year it gets harder." Keanu stood in stunned silence. With every new story, it became clearer to him. Many of these people weren't at fault for being on the streets. They had become victims of the system, powerless in the face of misfortune and social injustice. After Robs introduced him to the others, Keanu realized that he couldn't just sit by and watch their lives unravel. He had to do something. He couldn't keep observing. "I'll start by organizing a food distribution point for all of you. We'll distribute food and medicine as long as I have resources. I'll do everything I can to provide for you," Keanu said. Max nodded, and Lena looked up. A spark of hope ignited in their eyes. Robs, standing nearby, smiled. Despite his worn face from life on the streets, his eyes showed recognition and gratitude. "This is what we need, Keanu," he said quietly. "We don't want to live in the shadows anymore. We just want to be alive." With this decision, Keanu understood. He couldn't keep watching from afar. He was going to fight for these people. Over the next few days, Keanu worked tirelessly to organize aid. He knew it wouldn't be as easy as it seemed at first, but with every step, with every action, he saw how crucial this was for the people living on the streets. Every moment mattered because it wasn't just about food and medicine. It was a chance for them to find some hope. Keanu set up a food distribution point in the area where the homeless often gathered. He made arrangements with local supermarkets to receive products that had passed their expiration dates but could still be used. Robs helped with cooking, and many of the homeless began to come for a hot meal. Soon, others who wanted to help joined in, and the distribution points began to expand. But for Keanu, it wasn't just about feeding these people. He knew that for many of them, health was the number one and biggest issue. Not all of them had access to medical help, and those who did often couldn't afford it. So, Keanu organized a small medical station where basic medications like painkillers, antibiotics, cold medicine, and vitamins were distributed. Robs, despite his own situation, was ready to help. He had been a doctor before, and although his knowledge was outdated, he knew how to provide first aid. Robs began treating common ailments that were frequently found among the homeless, such as colds, inflammation, ulcers, and even burns. Keanu brought the medicines, and Robs taught others how to handle them. He felt that perhaps this was his chance to help, to return to something meaningful. One morning when Keanu brought another batch of medicines, he saw Robs carefully bandaging the arm of a man who had been severely burned. Rob's face was focused, and his hands moved confidently, just like in the old days. "Robs, are you okay?" Keanu asked, approaching him. I feel like I'm needed again," Robs replied without looking up. "These people, they just need basic help, and if I can help, why not do it?" Keanu stood beside him, watching Robs carefully wrap the bandage, and realized he had made the right choice. There was something alive in Rob's eyes now, something he hadn't seen before, something that only appeared once Rob started helping. "I'm glad you're here," Keanu said sincerely. "You've become who you were again. You're helping people, and not just me." Robs lifted his gaze and smiled slightly, as someone who had finally found their purpose. And it was a real change. Keanu knew that he wasn't alone in this anymore. These people who had ended up on the streets didn't just need food, they needed care, they needed help, they needed someone who understood them. And Robs had become that person for many. The few days that passed since Keanu decided to help these people were filled with not just actions, but real change. Los Angeles, where Keanu was doing this work, began to view the lives of the homeless not as a distant problem, but as part of its own world. He had become part of their lives, and his help wasn't just limited to food and medicine. He spoke to them, listened to their stories, and figured out how to make their lives a little easier. When Keanu returned to the aid station after another trip for groceries, he noticed how warmly everyone greeted him. This station had become not just a place where they could eat, but a place where they could feel like part of something. It was a turning point for everyone. "Do you see this, Keanu?" Rob said as they both watched the crowd. "We've started something that really matters." Keanu stood next to him and understood. This was only the beginning, and although the road ahead was long and difficult, he was ready to keep going. He knew he would fight for these people, because each of them, each person saved and cared for, was the very chance he needed. As time passed, Keanu continued to develop his project to help the homeless. What started with distributing food and medicine gradually turned into something much bigger. Keanu understood that temporary support wouldn't be enough to change the situation. It was necessary to help people find homes, work, and a way to return to normal life. And he decided to do that. Keanu organized the construction of a small residential complex on land that had once been a warehouse. The building was simple but cozy enough for people who had lost everything to begin anew. He involved local builders, who worked for minimal pay, and some resources were provided by charitable foundations and personal funds. Robs helped monitor the construction and also became one of those who trained the homeless in basic work skills. Robs was especially glad when he learned that his medical education had indeed played a role. Keanu had arranged with several private clinics and doctors who agreed to give Robs the opportunity to work as a junior doctor. He couldn't return to his previous profession right away, but his experience and desire to help became crucial. Robs was on the verge of recovery. One day, sitting in one of the temporary shelters, Robs couldn't hide his smile. He was holding a work contract he had just signed with one of the clinics. His dream of returning to medicine and helping people was finally becoming a reality. "You did it, Keanu," Robs said, handing the contract to Keanu. "This is not just a chance. This is my life. Thank you for believing in me." Keanu looked at him with sincere respect and smiled. "You earned this, Robs. You found your path again. I just gave you the opportunity. You chose this path, despite all the difficulties." Meanwhile, other homeless people who began to come to the assistance center also started to see that life could be different. Some began to work in cafeterias, cooking food for others. Others helped build a new residential complex. Keanu began to receive feedback from local businesses and organizations that were eager to offer jobs to people returning from the streets. Some found jobs in restaurants, others in stores. The important thing was, they started to believe in themselves. One evening, Keanu sat in his office, looking at the photos of the work they and the team had done over the past few months. He saw how, step by step, the lives of the homeless had changed. Their eyes, once filled with despair, now glimmered with hope and determination. When Robs entered the office with a folder of documents containing his medical licenses and paperwork for his new job, Keanu felt that this was the true moment of victory. They had done it. Together. "You know, Keanu," Robs said, placing the documents on the table, "I think many of us who ended up on the streets never imagined how everything could change. It wasn't just about getting help. It was about finding people who wouldn't let you give up." Keanu nodded and looked at Robs. "Exactly. Sometimes, all we need is someone who believes in us. And I believe that we all can change our lives. We all start from something small, but as you can see, now we have a chance. We're not just saving people, we're giving them the opportunity to be a part of society." Robs looked at his face, and in his eyes flickered gratitude. It was the moment when both of them realized that life could change. Keanu began to understand that his actions, his project to help the homeless, was not just a short-term charity, but a real chance for people to start over. Several years had passed since Keanu Reeves decided to help the homeless. His project had become not just a rescue for many, but a real movement that changed people's lives. He had not only built housing, organized work, but also given the homeless a chance for a new life. By working with various clinics and organizations, Keanu helped not only solve housing and food issues, but also provided medical assistance. His project had become a place where lost souls found not only a roof over their heads, but also a chance to reintegrate into society. But one day, Keanu felt that it was time to take care of himself. Lately, he had been feeling tired and experiencing mild back pain that wouldn't go away. He wasn't the type of person to worry too much, but he understood that health should not be postponed. So he decided to make an appointment with a doctor at one of the local private clinics that his project worked closely with. It was convenient because the clinic was not far from his home, and the quality of service guaranteed that there would be no issues with the visit. When he arrived at the clinic and approached the registration desk, he filled out the standard forms and waited for his turn. There weren't many people around, and the atmosphere in the clinic was cozy and calm. Soon, the nurse called him, and Keanu walked down the corridor to the office. As soon as the door to the office opened, Keanu was surprised to see a familiar face. He froze in place. Standing before him was Robs, the very homeless man he had met many years ago when he first started his project. Now Robs was in a white coat with medical instruments in hand, ready to see a patient. Keanu couldn't believe his eyes. Robs, who had once been homeless, who had gone through the toughest times, was now a doctor. His face was glowing with pride, and his eyes showed confidence. He had clearly achieved what he once could only dream of. "Keanu?" Robs asked in surprise, momentarily frozen in shock. Is it really you? Keanu smiled and walked up to him. Yeah, it's me. I can't believe you. A doctor? That's amazing, Robs. Robs wiped his hands on his coat and extended his hand to Keanu. Yeah, I'm a doctor now, he replied with a smile, but there was pride in his voice. I never thought I'd be here, but you gave me a chance that changed my life. I'm so grateful to all of you, Keanu. Keanu felt his heart warm up. He was genuinely happy for Robs that he not only chose the path of recovery, but also became successful in his profession. This was a living example of how his help had brought real change. I'm proud of you, Robs. You deserve this, Keanu said, sitting down on the chair at the doctor's desk. So many people were able to believe in themselves and start a new life because of your determination. Robs blushed a little, but then answered with confidence. Everything I've done is thanks to you. You gave me a chance and I used it. Now I want to help others just like you helped me. Keanu smiled and then spoke about his own problem, the back pain that had been bothering him. Robs was a professional. He carefully examined Keanu, asked the necessary questions, and prescribed treatment. The whole process went smoothly, and Keanu felt that his health was in good hands. When the appointment ended, Robs escorted Keanu to the office door and looked at him again with gratitude. You've done more than just help, Keanu. You gave me the chance to believe in myself again, and now I can help others, just like you helped me. Keanu shook Robs' hand firmly. You created your own destiny, Robs, and now your story is an inspiration for others. Remember that. With a smile on his face, Keanu left the clinic, feeling light in his heart. He was proud that his efforts had not been in vain. Robs had become a doctor, and his path was just one of many examples of how, starting from small steps, one could change not only their own life, but also the lives of others. It was an unexpected turn, but not as surprising as the whole story. It reminded Keanu of how important it is to just be human, to show attention, care, and empathy. And with that, it all ended. It's important to remember that every person deserves attention, and even the smallest help can give someone a chance for a new life. Keanu realized that the true value isn't in doing something great, but in being there for those who need it. Because the true strength of a person lies in their humanity.